It's been decried as a fantasy and a waste of money. Malcolm Turnbull even labelled it an abandonment of sovereignty. But the Morrison government's move to acquire nuclear submarines under the AUKUS agreement is gathering steam. Yesterday, Defence Minister Peter Dutton revealed the government is weeks away from deciding which boat to buy. And today, news of a $10 billion investment in a brand new submarine base on the East Coast to house part of the nuclear fleet. Now, for his analysis, I want to bring in the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Peter Jennings. Peter, welcome. I've got the political angle from Dennis Shanahan just then, but let's talk about the effectiveness of this plan. Where should such a base be built, and are we travelling in the right direction and at the right pace?
We're certainly picking up pace, there's no question about that. And Peter Dutton continues to surprise on the upside by suggesting that he will be able to make a choice about the submarine design earlier. I don't know if that's going to happen before the election or after it, but it certainly sounds like it's close, and a lot closer than the 18 months that was predicted when AUKUS was announced last year as being the time needed to pick a submarine. We do need a base, an additional Navy base on the East Coast, and I'm going to be neutral as to where that goes. It really does need to be based on the strategic requirements of the submarines, as Dennis Shanahan was suggesting, rather than job creation or anything else. You know, we allowed ourselves into a real cul-de-sac dealing with South Australia on jobs, when really the key issue was always about what bang for the buck is our military capability delivering. So I think the test for this government, and whichever party we have in government after the election, is going to be how quickly can they do this. Where I've been surprised, Chris, is that the Americans in particular seem to be very enthusiastic to get this done quickly. That can only be coming from the Oval Office, but I think that gives us, or should give us, some confidence that we can maybe move on this nuclear submarine capability a lot faster than has been thought up until now.
I want to move to the situation in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is doubling down on his invasion. He says he's not stopping until Kyiv surrenders. President Zelensky, on the other hand, has vowed there will be no quiet place on this earth for Russian forces except the grave. Meanwhile, the fighting continues. The civilian death toll climbs. And a report late today claims Russia has now employed Syrians to join their fight. Look, passion and pride is admirable, but how does that withstand this kind of onslaught?
Well, so far the onslaught has been limited. Russian tanks just seem to have ground to a halt in the north of the country. The Russians could be using more airstrikes, but they haven't done yet, particularly around Kyiv. And so my sense is that, you know, we're all beginning to think a little differently about this situation than we were 10 days ago. 10 days ago, it seemed almost automatic that ultimately Russia was going to be able to crush the Ukrainian spirit and take over in Kyiv. Now I'm not so sure. And maybe what we are going to see is a sort of a continued slow grind on the ground. The arrival of these Syrians is interesting, Chris, because I think what Putin is doing here is trying to minimise Russian casualties. And so he's turning to mercenaries, effectively, right. People that won't be mourned, frankly, if they die, by Russian parents. You know, so again, this just shows you how sort of bloodless the Putin strategy is. But the delays we've seen in the lack of Russian tank movements in the last few days is buying Ukraine time, is giving them the opportunity to be rearmed with very capable weapons, including now from Australia. And so I'm a little more optimistic now than I was a week ago, and thinking that, well, maybe Zelensky and his team can hold out in such a way that the pressure goes back onto Vladimir Putin, because it seems pretty clear to me that his own population is not really supporting this war. And therefore the question is, well, how long can Putin keep it up, where every atrocity is being filmed on a phone, and where the pressure from every other country in the world, bar China, is going to put, you know, immense pressure on Moscow to cease and desist.
OK, so China looks at all of this. They see what the rest of the world is doing about Russia and the president. Are they emboldened by what they see or more apprehensive?
It's interesting. I think you can sort of argue it either way. I mean, a sensible view from Beijing, looking at what's happened in Ukraine, would be to say, wow, this is not a good idea to invade your neighbours. But I can just see Xi Jinping, who is himself not getting access to honest advice, just as Vladimir Putin can't get honest advice. Xi Jinping may well be thinking to himself, we'll just do this so much more smarter than the Russians did. And so I think there is a period of maximum danger here. The other thing that happens from Ukraine is that Russia becomes more dependent on China. So China gets stronger as a result of Russia getting weaker. And I think that we should not underestimate the risk that Xi Jinping himself could miscalculate in the next 2, 3 or 4 years and conclude that he'll be able to run an invasion of Taiwan more effectively than Putin ran the invasion of Ukraine. And therefore the challenge for all of us is, what can we do to make Taiwan stronger now so that we're not in a situation like Ukraine was a week or two ago, but
Yes.
Taiwan is, through its own efforts, sufficiently capable that China will always look at it and think to itself, look, invasion might happen, it might be better off on another day. Let's not do that today.
Always good to get your analysis. Peter Jennings, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure.